What's up, everybody? My name is Will Power. This is Real Talk Baseball. What's up, Felix? I saw your comment a couple minutes ago. How you doing, man? Glad you can make it. Looks like I'm doing the show solo again today. Unfortunately, Carlos and Javi are not able to make it. So if you guys have any questions, I should be able to see all the comments. I'll try to get to them as soon as I can. Um, Today we are doing shortstop preview, and shortstop, man, this one was really tough for me to do my rankings. There's just so many good shortstops that are all kind of within the same tier, and it was fun, it was challenging, and hopefully you guys get some good information today. All right, so starting off with number one. I think this is everybody's number one. Obviously it's Trey Turner. In some leagues, he's going number one overall. Personally, I don't have him number one overall. I understand that the stolen bases are hard to come by, especially as many as he's possibly able to produce. Moving over from Los Angeles to Philly, it's going to be opportunities for him to run a little bit more. He is. Let me get rid of that glow right there. There we go. So he is going to be he's going to be the leadoff man, most likely, for Philadelphia, and that means it's going to be a lot more opportunities for him to run. I know that when he was in Washington, he was hitting in front of Bryce Harper. The thought was that maybe he wouldn't run so much because hitting in front of Bryce Harper, they're just going to move him over to second base anyway. The opposing team would move him over to second base if he potentially reached first. And, it happened, but it didn't happen as often as a lot of people thought it would. So I think in Philadelphia, batting leadoff, he's actually going to get a lot more opportunities. It seems like the Phillies like to run a little bit more than the Dodgers did. And we could possibly see him have, hit his record or break his record for stolen bases per season. Last season, he had 27 stolen bases. They have him projected for about 30. I think it's a little bit safer to say that he's probably going to get 35. He should see about the same plate appearances that he did last season, even though he was hitting number 3 in the Dodgers lineup. The Dodgers just had such a much better lineup than the Phillies currently do, so he was able to get a lot more plate appearances, even in the 3-hole. But it shouldn't be too much of a downgrade. The Phillies still have a really good lineup, as we saw that made it to the World Series last year. Congratulations to the Phillies. And so last season, he had 21 home runs with 101 runs scored, and 100 RBI with 27 stolen bases. So excellent numbers. Excellent numbers. What's up, Eli? Yes, plus the bigger bases. Trey Turner is most likely going to get a lot more stolen bases. I think not only just the bigger bases, but also the rule about the pitchers can only throw over to try to pick off a player twice per at bat. So if a pitcher does try to throw over 2 times, then Trey Turner, he's going to get the green light to run, regardless of any situation. I personally think, and that's one of the main reasons why they picked him up. He's one of the best contact hit for contact shortstops out there, and his speed is just undeniable. I believe he's 5th in sprint speed in the majors right now. Elite contact skills, decent pop, as we saw with the 21 home runs. Last season he finished 6th in points leagues, 8th in roto, and he finished in the top 10 in the last 3 seasons. So there is another name out there that's kind of floating that could possibly take that number 1 spot from him. We'll get to that in a minute. So like I said earlier, the Phillies lineup isn't as stacked as the Dodgers, but the Phillies just went to the World Series. They are a contender. They're going to be going through the lineup a lot, especially when Bryce Harper comes back. Now, originally Bryce Harper wasn't supposed to come back until possibly the end of June, maybe early July because of his injury. But now that they're saying that Bryce Harper can start baseball activities at the end of March, which means he'll probably be back probably end of April. Let's say they give him like a about a month to get ready from when he can start baseball activities. So that's great opportunities for Trey Turner to score some more runs. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to get another 100 runs this season with even more home runs because the Philly Stadium, Citizens Bank Park, it's actually more of a hitter's ballpark than a pitcher's ballpark. It's complete opposite from what Dodger Stadium was. So seeing him hit the 21 home runs in Dodger Stadium, I think that we could see that number increase hitting in a hitter-friendly ballpark. So moving on to number 2. Now this one, I think the only reason why I have this next guy at number 2 is because he's going to miss the first month of the season, and that's Fernando Tatis Jr. Now, I used to be kind of low on this guy. After seeing what he did in the majors, I didn't believe it. I didn't think that it was something that he could sustain. But this guy has everything that you would want in a fantasy baseball player. He has elite contact skills. He has power. He has speed on the base paths. He has a good baseball mind. The only downgrade that I have from him, which is not fantasy relevant at all, is his defense. He's a terrible defensive shortstop. He's a terrible defensive outfielder. We've seen him mess up just routine ground balls in the infield. We've seen him mess up routine pop flies in the outfield. This guy really needs to work on his defense if he wants to stay in the field. Otherwise, I see him as just a permanent DH, which is not good for the Padres this year because they just signed Nelson Cruz to a 1-year deal, I believe. So having Nelson Cruz in the lineup is great for the Padres. It's great for Tatis also because Nelson Cruz is probably going to hit behind Tatis, which means more run opportunities for Tatis. But that means that Tatis is going to have to play the field every day. So that is a slight downgrade for the Padres in terms of defense. So he didn't play at all last year because of injuries, because of the suspension that he had at the end of the season. But in 2021, Fernando Tatis Jr. had 42 home runs with 99 runs scored, 97 RBI, in 456 plate appearances. Now, 546 plate appearances. 546 plate appearances is not a lot for a guy hitting, number 2 or number 3. I wonder where he's going to hit in the lineup this year. It's got to be 1, 2, or 3. Machado hitting behind him, Nelson Cruz hitting behind him, Soto hitting behind him. I would imagine that Soto would probably be 3, Machado would be 4. So we could see Tatis at number 1 or number 2. So the reason why he only had 546 plate appearances is because he had the shoulder thing in 2021. So he missed about, I want to say it was like a month and a half total of the season, and he still hit 42 home runs with 99 runs and 97 RBI. And he had 25 stolen bases on top of that. So if you can get that out of a player that missed a month and a half of the season, this is the guy that I think could just blow us all away in 2023. And honestly, I really think that Fernando Tatis at ADP 20 is going to be my sleeper. It's hard to imagine that a sleeper would be at such an early point in the draft. But honestly, at number 20, that means he's going towards the end of the second round. Even though he's missing a month of the season, I think that this guy is potentially a first round pick. He is potentially the number 1 pick overall, as he was, I believe it was in 2022 at the beginning of the season. And then the wrist injury with the motorcycle accident and having surgery in the off season and the steroid scandal because of the trying to make it back to the majors. Now, a lot of people are assuming that maybe he had been using steroids for a while, and that's why he hit the 42 home runs. He didn't hit 42 home runs because of the steroids. He hit 42 home runs because that was the end of the juice ball era. So in 2021, we still had the juice ball. And, home runs were plentiful. That it shows it across the board, across every position, second base, shortstop, everyone out there. It was just a lot easier to hit home runs in 2021 than it is in 2022 and 2023. I don't think that he's going to hit that many home runs, 42 this season, but considering that he missed five or 6 weeks of last season or of 2021, and he still hit 42 home runs, I think it's closer that we're probably going to see between 35 and 40 from him. I'd say that 40 is the max, but in addition to that, the 25 stolen bases that we saw, now with the bigger bases, now with more plate appearances, he's never had any problems with his legs. The injuries have never been in his legs. It's always been in the upper body and the arm. So if we can keep him off the field and, just have him bat, then that would actually help him out with the injury concerns as well. So I think he could potentially be a 30-30 guy, 30 home runs and 30 stolen bases. And that is definitely worthy of a first round pick. He ended the season with a 282 batting average with an expected batting average of 279. So it's right in line there. Elite contact skills, 364 on base percentage. So almost 100 points higher than his batting average was, a 975 OPS. That is just freaking amazing. That is almost 1,000 OPS. If you don't know what OPS is, it's on base plus slugging percentage. It calculates how often a batter reaches base, and it adds it to their total with their slug percentage, which is how many extra base hits they get out of all their hits. So just those are just outrageous numbers. His slug was 611, expected slug was 617. As long as the surgery doesn't really mess with his mechanics too much. I mean, he's had a year to get over it and find his swing. And this guy's a baseball player, man. Like I don't see any reason to downgrade him, even though he had the last year off completely because of injury and the suspension. I think that this has been Tatis his entire baseball life. This guy just knows how to hit, and we could potentially see, number one, number two overall player of the year, and he's going to go a lot earlier than drafts next season. So next, moving on to number 3. Honestly, the rest of the list that I have, it was really hard to put together. At number 3, first I had Bo Bichette. And ultimately, I ended up choosing Corey Seager instead. I think that Corey Seager just has just such a high ceiling, that a high ceiling and a high floor. That this guy, we finally saw what he can do when he's healthy. 663 plate appearances, 33 home runs, 91 runs scored, 83 RBI. He wasn't a zero at stolen bases. He had 3 stolen bases, and possibly with the bigger bases, we'll see a little bit more. I wouldn't expect him to have more than maybe 5. But that you can't really expect too much from a guy that has like he's in the 60th percentile for sprint speed. So don't expect too much. But the only spot that I saw that he was lacking in was his batting average. He only batted 245, which is why he's probably going so low in drafts. His current ADP is at 51, but his expected batting average was 283. And the general consensus is that Corey Seager was the one player that he was hindered the most by the shift. Now that the shift is being banned, we're going to see his batting average climb incredibly high. If his expected batting average is 283, you can probably expect him to hit closer to that. I'd say between 280 and 300, probably closer to the 300. On base percentage was 317. Coming from a 245 batting average, that's pretty damn good. 15.7% K rate. He only had 103 strikeouts. If you can be around 100 strikeouts, a couple more, a couple less, that's pretty decent. Jasper, I'm on Lowe's. Listen, I don't know what that means, Felix. Oh, Jasper, what's up, dude? On the road to the liquor store. I'll listen. Nice. Thanks for joining in, man. Again, if you guys have any questions, I'm here for you. Today is the shortstop preview, but if you have any questions about fantasy in general, I'm here. So Corey Seager, um, I really don't think there's a lot more to say about him. I think that you can trust Corey Seager to be Corey Seager, which is close to 300, at least 30 home runs if he stays healthy for the season, which we saw last year. He's in not the greatest lineup in the Rangers, but the top of the lineup in the Rangers where he hits is pretty damn good. So we'll see a lot of runs scored and a lot of RBIs, and not too many stolen bases for you categories league players. Maybe five, but still, that's great stats for a guy going number 51 overall in fantasy drafts. Moving on to number 4. Originally I had Bo Bichette at number 3, and it was mainly because of the threat of the stolen bases. But ultimately, I went with Corey Seager just because I trust him a little bit more. Bo Bichette, I think the reason why Bo Bichette was so successful last season, and in previous seasons before that also, is because he hits in the top of an amazing lineup, which means a lot of runs scored, even a lot of RBI opportunities. Because towards the end of the Toronto lineup, they still look pretty damn good. So Bo Bichette hit 24 home runs, 91 runs scored, 93 RBI. This guy had 697 plate appearances. Holy, yeah, that's a lot. So next season, I don't really see, where we can really downgrade him. I'm still projecting 700 plate appearances. Um, Runs scored and RBIs and home runs should be about the same. The only thing that I wish Bo Bichette would do is kind of hit the ball in the air a little bit more. His launch angle is a little bit low. It's at a 8.5, and you want that to be in the double digits, like 11, 12, 13, just to hit the ball in the air a little bit more. So Bo Bichette is very consistent about hitting line drives, but he also hits the ball on the ground a lot. And his batting average of 290, it's a little bit inflated from his expected batting average of 278, but I think that the reason why his batting average is a little bit higher than his expected is because when he does hit the ball on the ground, it should be just like, a routine out, but this guy's pretty fast too. So he actually runs out the ball and ends up being safe. So the 290 batting average, I think that's pretty consistent with his skill set. He hits the ball incredibly hard, 91.9 miles per hour. Um, like I said, the reason why he doesn't hit a lot more home runs, he only had 24 last season, is because his launch angle is just too low. He's kind of the product of a perfect little league swing, very level, line drives all day. If he can increase his launch angle back to 12 degrees like it was in the shortened season in 2020, we could see a legitimate first round caliber player being drafted in the middle of the second round. At current ADP is at 18. I honestly believe that the reason why it's so high is because a lot of people play in categories leagues or roto, and with his 13 stolen bases last year, you could probably expect closer to 20 this year with the size of the base increase. Um, yeah, but I mean, he's a compiler, man. He gets a lot of at bats and puts the wood on the ball a lot. Moving on to number 5. This one was a little tough for me also. Like I said, the guys in the middle area right here are just kind of all over the place. I really believe that, anyone that does their own personal rankings, I think that we all kind of have like the same general 6 guys that are going, like, we're for shortstops, 3 to 8, 3 to 9, something like that. Just in different orders. So at number 5, I have Corey Seager's teammate, Marcus Semien. Marcus Semien had 724 plate appearances the last 2 seasons in a row. Last year, he hit 26 home runs, 101 runs scored, 83 RBI, 25 stolen bases. This guy's 32 years old, and he's still stealing 25 bases. And with the size increase of the base, we're probably going to see a little bit more. I'd say closer to 30. Probably not too much more because he already does run a lot. I think Simeon's best attribute is that this guy is a machine. 724 plate appearances the last 2 seasons. Simeon has only missed 11 games in the past 5 seasons. He has more games played equals more plate appearances equals more hits and more runs, especially hitting in front of guys like Seager, Nate Lowe, and Adolis Garcia. What also separates Simeon apart from the other shortstops in this tier is his willingness to steal bases. There's not a lot of shortstops out there that really steal a lot of bases. So I'm glad to see that from him. He was caught stealing 8 times last season, but with the increased size of the base, we could see Simeon's stolen bases number increase as well. In the power department, Simeon doesn't really hit the ball especially hard. He doesn't hit the ball very hard at all, actually. But of his 26 home runs last season, 25 of them were hit to the pull side, where the fence is only 332 feet. So I wouldn't expect any less than that. The guys that pull the ball and put the ball in the air a little bit more, his launch angle is at 19.9. That means he puts the ball in the air a lot. I could possibly see his home run total at least stay the same, possibly increase. I think his ceiling is about 30, but at least expect 25 home runs from Marcus Semien. Moving on to number 6, Francisco Lindor. Francisco Lindor is just this one. He's very hard, man. He's not really the biggest guy. He hits the ball somewhat hard, 89.3 miles per hour on average last season. Launch angle is good, 13.8. Strikes out a lot, but he's just very up and down. The season before, we didn't really see very good statistics from him. But just going off of last season, he had 26 home runs, 98 runs scored, 107 RBI with 16 stolen bases. So this guy's 29 years old, still running. I think that we could basically get the same type of player that we had last season. I have him projected for 700 plate appearances, about 170 hits, 25 home runs, 200 combined runs and RBI with 20 stolen bases. So I'm kind of predicting that every player, their stolen bases are going to increase just a little bit. So the guys that got 10 stolen bases are probably going to be around 13, 14. Guys that stole 20 are going to be closer to 25. I also look at how many times they were caught stealing. If I see a guy that had 25 stolen bases out of 32 opportunities, I'm going to assume that at least 5 of those are going to be called safe this season. So instead of 25, it'll be 30, and maybe just caught stealing twice, just because of the base increase size. Sorry about that. Lindor hasn't been the same player since he left Cleveland, but he's a pretty safe bet for 200 runs and RBI, 25 home runs, and at least 15 stolen bases. He did overachieve in batting average a bit. Last year, his batting average was 270. His expected was 254. So I 254 was actually his expected batting average for the last 2 seasons. So I wouldn't expect too much from Lindor in the batting average department. I'd say his ceiling is about 265, but a pretty safe floor would be about 250. Moving on to number 7. Let's see, where are we at on time? I don't see the time. Oh, well, you guys let me know if it starts getting late. Number 7, I have Xander Bogaerts. Xander Bogaerts, his current ADP is 77 overall. Xander Bogaerts is a baseball player, man. And we saw that, in Boston. He was one of the stars in Boston, won a World Series with Boston. I think if I wasn't going with Tatis as my sleeper, I'd say Bogaerts is my sleeper at number 77 overall. That is a little bit late, but I understand, like, with so many other stars around him, a lot of people want to go after third base. They want to go after second base before shortstop, because you can get a good shortstop later on in the draft. Guys like Willy Adames or Carlos Correa. There's a lot of names out there that would be serviceable as your starting shortstop. And there are other positions that you kind of want to fill a little bit earlier. Outfield is very shallow. Third base is very shallow. Second base is very shallow. So I completely understand. Bogarts is 32 years old. He's a big dude, 6'2", 218 pounds. Last season, he only hit 15 home runs. That's basically the total that we've been seeing him hit for the last few seasons. And it's a bit of a park downgrade going from Fenway to Petco Park in San Diego. Um, I think the biggest part is from the advantage of drafting Bogarts is the Padres lineup is just completely stacked. You know, as we talked about with Tatis earlier, way better than what the Red Sox are looking like last season and even in 2023. Bogarts overachieved his expected stats by a huge margin. He batted 307 last season, and that's kind of misleading. His expected batting average was only 259, so 50 points higher in batting average and almost 100 points in slug. His slug was 456, expected slug was 383. But he's been doing it his whole career, so I don't see any reason to downgrade him this season now. Um, what I mean by that is since the beginning of his career, he has overachieved and has gone over his expected stats by a pretty decent margin. Every year, he's only expected about uh, 260 batting average with about a 450. Oh, sorry, a 380 slug, 400 slug, and he's been consistently just playing over his head. So I don't expect the park change to be like too much of a downgrade for him. He doesn't really hit a lot of home runs as it is. He's more of a doubles guy. He had 53 extra base hits last season. So I would project him to maybe hit a little bit more than that, possibly 60, 65, because he's probably going to get a little more plate appearances. Um, just playing in a better lineup. He had 631 plate appearances last season. I'm projecting 700. I think that they're having Bogarts as their leadoff hitter this season, the Padres. So let's see. He's yeah. I mean that's it for Bogarts. So moving on to number 7 now. Number 7, I chose Bobby Witt as my number 7 overall at the shortstop position. Now, I've already talked about him in the third base preview, so I don't want to go in too much detail. Now, this guy was my bust at the third base position, and Bobby Witt is again my bust at the shortstop position. Going at ADP 16 overall, his stats were just terrible last year. A 254 batting average, which is actually not that bad. 20 home runs and 30 stolen bases are great in 632 plate appearances, but 82 runs and 80 RBI. In a points league, his plate discipline is just really, really low. He had 135 strikeouts last season with a K rate of 21.4. I could potentially see Bobby Witt exceeding all of this in the future, but he's only 22 years old coming off his rookie season. I just don't see it happening anytime soon. Maybe 2-3 years after he is a seasoned player, but I am a firm believer in the sophomore slump. So he didn't have the best season last year. He had lots of opportunities to run. And he took those opportunities, but I just think that but hitting in the Royals lineup is a somewhat of a downgrade for him. I wouldn't expect him to go anything higher than what he was last season. Only 30 walks. That's terrible. 30 walks, 235 strikeouts. And that's why I said in points leagues, plate discipline is terrible. I definitely wouldn't want him in a points league. In a categories league, those 30 to 35 stolen bases are definitely going to help a lot. But just this guy just strikes out too much. He doesn't hit the ball especially hard. Average exit velocity was 89.7. Yeah, I mean that's basically all I want to say about Bobby Witt. All right, moving on to number 9. Where's my number 9? Oh my God, where's my number 9? Aha. No. Uh-oh. Where's my notes? Ah, there it is. My bad. My bad, guys. All right, number 9. I have Carlos Correa. Now, Carlos Correa had an interesting offseason. At the end of 2022, he was a Twin, and then he was a Giant, and then he was a Met, and then he was a Twin again. So lots of controversy around his offseason. We saw multiple teams, the Giants and the Mets, offer him substantial contracts, a lot of money, a lot of years, and ultimately both of them backed out on the deal because his X-rays, on his physical came back for his leg. I believe it was the ankle, and it didn't look good long term. So these teams were offering him after the physical came back. They wanted to offer him a shorter contract with a lot more money. He was probably going to make about $40 million a year, but only about 4 or 5 years rather than the 10 or more that he was looking for. So ultimately, the Twins took him back, and he re-signed with the Twins. That agent of his is pretty damn smart. The way that he went about it. Honestly, I don't really see why um he was offered so much money in so many years. I get that he's an amazing defensive shortstop, but his bat is good, but it's not like anywhere near like elite. Last season, current ADP for Carlos Correa is 104, so he's not even going in the top 100, which I kind of agree with. 22 home runs last season, 0 stolen bases. Do not expect any speed from this guy. 22 home runs, 70 runs scored, 64 RBI. I believe that is a little deflated. I think that we can see him increase that a bit. I don't understand why it's so low, 70 runs and 64 RBI. I think that we could see closer to like 85 runs scored and 75 RBI, 0 stolen bases, about the same walks, 61 last season, and strikeouts, 121 last season. I wouldn't think that would change too much. Counting stats were terrible for Correa in 2022, but returning to the Twins could be the best scenario for Correa. Uh, Team chemistry and all that. Correa is somewhat of a boring fantasy option, but he should be good for 20 plus home runs, 80 RBI, 80 runs scored, and a 270 batting average. Last season, he hit 291. He definitely hit over his ceiling last year. Expected batting average was 276. Slug was 467. Expected slug was 484. So he underperformed a bit in that category, which is great because expected slug, hopefully we'll see a little bit more doubles and possibly a little bit more home runs next season. I'd say 25 is his ceiling. I don't think he can hit any more than that. He's a big dude. He doesn't really look too big on TV, other than next to standing his old teammate. Sorry, I was just reading a comment. Damn, Yasmani Grandal had more stolen bases than Carlos Correa. Yeah, he's a 0, man. He's a 0 in the speed department, which is why he didn't really have that many extra base hits either. 47. We're used to seeing top shortstops that are getting all this money, or top players getting all this money, having closer to 60, 70 extra base hits, and his underwhelming 47 extra base hits just not as it. Launch angle at 11.6, K rate at 20.6. I don't really see a lot to be excited about this guy, but this is the point in your shortstop, in your drafts, that once you see Carlos Correa, the amount of shortstops that are left it's very small. So if you don't have a shortstop by the time you see Carlos Correa, maybe you could pass him up and go after the next couple guys that I'm going to talk about. But this is kind of the end of that tier, so you want to be ready just in case just in case you're left without a starting shortstop, and you don't want to be left with guys at the end of your draft. In a categories league, I'd say that Tommy Edman is probably the last shortstop um, that you don't want to pass by. In a points league, it's probably going to be either Dansby Swanson or Willy Adames. Now, my number 10 that I want to talk about now is Willy Adames, 27 years old. This is that age that I'm always talking about. Carlos and Tony and Javi and all you guys that listen pretty often, all you guys know that I am very invested in these guys that are going into their age 27, 28, 29 seasons. I really feel that that's when you get your man strength. Your body starts becoming more of a man rather than a boy. So we could possibly see Willy Adames even outperform what he did last year, which were great numbers. Now, his 238 batting average it left a lot to be desired, but when you're hitting 31 home runs and you score 83 runs and 98 RBI, I don't even know why I have Carlos Correa ahead of Willy Adames. It's just I really think that Willy Adames is potentially a great sleeper. His ADP is at 91. Carlos Correa's ADP was at 104. You know what? I'm actually going to switch those. So if you guys are watching, I'm going to have Willy Adames at number 9 and Carlos Correa at number 10. So Willy Adames, 27 years old, 8 stolen bases last season. I don't know about Adames hitting 30 home runs that's last season. I think that was pretty much his ceiling. He doesn't hit the ball very hard, doesn't pull the ball very heavily. It could just be park factor and launch angle. Launch angle is at 18.9 degrees. That's amazing. That means he hits the ball in the air a lot. Last season, of his 31 home runs, 18 of them were hit at home in Milwaukee. So he's definitely more comfortable at home. I'd say he's more valuable in categories leagues because his plate discipline is pretty terrible, striking out 166 times in 617 plate appearances. That's a 27% K rate, while he only walked 49 times. So in categories leagues, I'm going to move Willy Adames to number 9. And points leagues, I'm still going to keep Correa at number 9 and leave Adames at number 10. Moving on to Dansby Swanson. So Dansby Swanson, the reason why I have him so late, now his current ADP is 74, which means in most drafts, he's actually going before Willy Adames, before Carlos Correa. I don't see a lot to get excited about him. First off, if Swanson stayed in Atlanta, he definitely would have been higher on my list, but he's in a worse lineup, a worse ballpark, not in terms of dimensions, but because the wind is so unpredictable in Chicago, there's going to be some days where the wind is blowing out and some days where the wind is blowing in. So, on some days he's going to have some great pop in his bat, and some days he's really not. It's just going to be some easy pop-ups in the outfield. And since there's a worse lineup, there's no chance to reach his 99 runs scored and 96 RBI again. I think home runs are going to be hit and miss. I think we're going to see that diminish a bit. He did have 18 stolen bases out of 25 attempts. And with the base size increase, we could possibly see him hit 25 stolen bases. But that really all depends on how often David Ross, the manager of the Cubs, really likes to send him. I don't know where he's going to hit in the lineup. I would assume that it would be in the number 2 hole. That's where he hit in Atlanta. So 18 stolen bases is pretty significant. We could see that increase a bit, probably to 20, maybe a little bit more. He was caught stealing, 7 times last season. So you want to give him like an extra 3 or 4, just because of the size increase. So 20 seems in the realm of possibility. I don't really think that we're going to see him hit 25 home runs again. He's going to have less plate appearances, less at bats. So the 25 home runs he hit last season, it's probably going to be closer to about 20 this season. 99 runs scored and 99 RBI last season. I could see that more about 85 and 85 because of the worst lineup that he's going to be hitting in. .277 batting average with an expected BA of 257. So I don't really expect him to hit anything close to what he did last season. I'm a firm believer in contract seasons, just these players just kind of playing over their head and wanting to play for that contract, so they just play a little bit harder. Now that Swanson has that contract, I don't really expect him to play, the way that he did last season. I always kind of go back to Eric Hosmer, like when Eric Hosmer won the World Series in 2015 with the Royals. He had a career year, batted close to 300, had like 30 home runs, and then the next few seasons with the Padres, he's just very boring. Not the type of player that you want to draft, which is why I have Swanson so low. ADP at 74. I have him outside the top 100 personally. Um, I guess that's about it that I want to say about Dansby Swanson. And number 12 on my list. I know I skipped a few guys that there are. There's a few guys in current ADP that are a little bit higher than this guy, but I'm actually very high on Wander Franco. Um, I really think the Wander Franco is just going to have a breakout sometime in the next few seasons. It could possibly be in 2023. And with this guy going at current ADP of 89.4, he is in the top 100. I just have him downgraded just a little bit just because he he hasn't played a full season in the majors yet. He just keeps on getting hurt, and it's hard to raise your stock when you're not getting that many plate appearances. 344 plate appearances last season, 6 home runs and 8 stolen bases. I don't know. Doesn't hit the ball especially hard. He hits the ball on average at 87.3 miles an hour. He did have 8 stolen bases on 8 attempts, and we could see that number increase pretty high. If he plays the full season, I could see about 25 stolen bases. Um, the one thing that I love about Franco is his plate discipline. He's only played half the season in 2022, but his K rate was at a 9.6%. Um, he had 26 walks to go along with his 33 strikeouts, which makes him more valuable in points leagues than in categories leagues or roto. Um, that's an amazing K rate, 9.6. If you're under 10%, your plate discipline is pretty damn good. Launch angle is a little bit low, 8.2, so he doesn't really hit the ball in the air a lot. It's more line drives and ground balls, unfortunately. But this guy's only 22 years old. Give him some time. He is in a Rays lineup that doesn't really have a lot of veterans that he can get advice from. I wish he was on a little bit better team so he can get some more guidance, but that's just the way it is. I really feel like the Rays are actually a very developmental team. They're very good at drafting. They're very good at developing their players. So Wander Franco, I think they see the holes in his game, and it shouldn't be too hard to correct them with the Rays track record of just being good at developing their players, pitchers and hitters. We've seen that with guys like Randy Arozarena and Brett Phillips. One of the guys that went off in the World Series in 2020. So next season, I'm projecting about 685 plate appearances if he can stay healthy, 15 home runs, 25 stolen bases, 90 runs scored, and 70 RBI. Look to see him walk about 50 times and strike out about 70 times. And that's basically it that I have. If you guys have any questions, I'll be here for about another minute or so. I want to thank everyone for joining in. About that 45-minute mark right now, so I like to keep it under an hour. It is a little bit easier when I'm by myself, although I do prefer when I have either Javi or Carlos here so I can feed off of them and kind of get their perspective as well. All right, Eli, Felix, Jasper, I appreciate you guys joining in the show, and it doesn't look like anyone has any questions, so My name is Will Power for Real Talk Baseball, and I'm signing out. I'll see you guys next week with another position preview of catchers. See you guys.